We're moving into a new era of college football, and one thing that everybody who follows West Coast sports is absolutely sure of is that the rest of the country doesn't pay much attention to us outside of Oregon and aside of USC. That is, unless you're one of them smart Big Ten fans who watches the Unafraid Show. And of course you're smart. I'm talking about your friends. You might want to share this the way they can get on your level. So for Big Ten fans that might not know what you're getting with the 4 Pac-12 teams that are joining your conference, let me get you up to speed. And after this, jump on over to my video ranking the Big Ten teams by likelihood of success over the next 5 years, and then let me know your thoughts. But we're going to get started with my Oregon Ducks, because admittedly, the Big Ten has not historically been kind to Oregon. The Ducks are 22-35 against Big Ten teams and have never played against Rutgers or Maryland. But recent history has told a much different story. The last time that Oregon played Wisconsin, Ohio State, Nebraska, and Michigan State, all wins, baby. And you got to go back 17 years to find their last matchup with Michigan, and they won that one too. To compete in the Big Ten, you have to recruit at an elite level, and Oregon does that. According to 247, the Ducks nabbed 13 of the top 250 in the country in 23, and then up that to 15 in the class of 2024, and have one of the highest blue chip rankings in the country. And that's 5 more than Ohio State over that same period, and 17 more than Michigan. So if you're one of those your talent is destiny people, expect Oregon to come in and compete right away. But then you might be asking, is Oregon physical enough, or are all these high-level recruits just speedy West Coast athletes that will fold like lawn chairs when they get hit in the mouth? I'm glad you asked, because Oregon has had 5 offensive linemen drafted since 2020, including a first-rounder, and this year they're expected to have the first center taken off the board in Jackson Powers Johnson. And it helps to have head coach Dan Lanning, who has been at Alabama and at Georgia and understands the physical blueprint that it takes to compete in the trenches. And you can listen to my sit down with Coach Dan Lanning and judge the man for yourself. But it sounds like he plans on being at Oregon for a long time. And the Ducks are stepping into a space where they aren't at a resource disadvantage, because the Big Ten is a tough conference to compete when it comes to NIL. And people will say, Phil Knight's the only reason for that. Well, don't forget to say thank you for all those checks that Nike writes to Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, Penn State, Purdue, Minnesota, Iowa, and Illinois as well, because you guys are very welcome. And don't go biting the hand that feeds you now. And what about Oregon's biggest rival, the Washington Huskies? Because they're fresh off a national championship appearance with former Big Ten offensive coordinator Kalen DeBoer and Big Ten quarterback Michael Penix Jr. headed out the door. Can they rebound from massive coaching turnover and roster turnover to compete in the Big Ten? I believe that they can. Here's the dirty little secret about Kalen DeBoer at Washington. There might not have been a better in-game coach on the planet last year, but the truth is Washington wasn't recruiting at the level that they needed to in order to sustain the success that they had in the past year. And their new head coach, Jedd Fisch, managed to take Arizona, arguably the worst team in all of FBS 3 years ago, to a top 15 team with a serious California pipeline. I think he'll bring that recruiting juice that Kalen DeBoer lacked. And I think that the administration is committed to the idea of putting every resource available behind Washington football to make sure that they stay nationally relevant. Now, whether they can stomach that commitment over time is another story, but as of today, they're all in. Now, Washington is going to take a little bit of a dip next year, because they weren't just senior heavy, they were super senior heavy on both sides of the ball. And Kalen DeBoer also took some of the returning talent with him to Tuscaloosa. But if Jedd Fisch proved anything while he was at Arizona, it's that he can rebuild a roster. And this time, he'll be doing it with a respectable NIL fund. If Washington isn't challenging some of the Big Ten's best teams on and off the field by 2026, I'll be shocked. Now, how about USC? Look, these aren't your parents' Trojans. Reggie Bush and Troy Polamalu aren't walking through that door, but they are still dangerous. But the question is, are they dangerous enough to be competitive week over week against teams in the Big Ten that are perfectly happy making any game a rock fight? That's the million-dollar question, because USC is in the middle of one of the deepest talent pools on earth in LA, and they're always going to be talented. And with this track record of #1 picks and Heisman Trophy winners, Lincoln Riley can handpick the best high school or portal quarterback he wants every single year. And Big Ten fans, y'all might learn the hard way, because opening up your conference to the LA market just might backfire. I'm serious. So many Pac-12 teams saw that you got to watch your players in post-game handshake lines at the Coliseum, because they might be tempted to switch jerseys and stick around in that LA sunshine. Because these 20-year-olds aren't out here watching Fox News and posting online about the demise of Los Angeles. LA is still dope. They're kids, and being a young star athlete in Hollywood is still as cool as it's ever been. Every question about USC comes down to whether they're tough enough to compete in the Big Ten. And right now, the answer is no, until they prove differently. They weren't tough enough to fend off Utah over a couple of years, and now they're moving to a whole conference of Utahs? I could see USC putting 60 on Indiana one week and then 6 on Iowa the next. I think ultimately they'll get life figured out in the Big Ten, but I can guarantee you there will be an adjustment period, and it'll be interesting to see if Lincoln Riley is interested in evolving and becoming competitive on the defensive end, or if he's still going to try to outscore everybody, because they're saying one thing, but we'll see what they actually do, or if he tries to head to the NFL as a way out. And finally, my UCLA Bruins. And I say my UCLA Bruins because I married into it, and you know how that goes. Happy wife, happy life. And Big Ten fans, I think you can understand that, because that still applies out here on the West Coast. Honestly, I hate this move for UCLA. The Pac-12 South was theirs for the taking in USC's Clay Helton years, and it felt like they spent the entire time politely declining the throne, because UCLA has been chronically unserious about football and recruiting in the modern era. And now the fan base is up in arms about the idea that the opportunity for a national coaching search ended with the internal elevation of Deshaun Foster to replace Chip Kelly. I like Deshaun Foster. I think he'll be successful, and he'll be way more serious about recruiting than Chip Kelly was. But it's going to take more than a young, energetic, alumni head coach to lift a program out of mediocrity. It takes administrative and community buy-in. And even though UCLA led the way on leaving the Pac-12 to head to the Big Ten, I'm not convinced that they understand the consequences, because I'm afraid the Rose Bowl is going to feel like an away game every single week, because Big Ten fans travel, and true away games are going to feel like hell on earth. And both LA schools have to deal with the fact that the average high temperature in Lincoln, Nebraska in early November is Los Angeles average low. And the one thing that UCLA has done better than USC in recent years is understand that football still comes down to running the ball and stopping the run. And that could be their one saving grace when it comes to staying out of the Big Ten basement. But it's hard to imagine them breaking into the top echelon of the Big Ten without massive improvements in talent acquisition and NIL funds. Let me know in the comments which Pac-12 addition to the Big Ten will have the most success and the quickest, and which school you think is going to come to regret the move.